Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It's Sunday night, September 9th, 2018. And tonight's topic is still no firm evidence that JPMorgan has any physical silver. However, tonight we're not going to spend a lot of time disproving that JPMorgan doesn't have any physical silver. We're actually going to entertain the concept that at least in one area they might have silver, and then we're going to go through what that might mean. However, I may not come to the conclusion that it means anything positive for precious metals prices. So I'm going to apply a different analysis to the concept that JPMorgan might have a certain amount of silver. It's a stretch to get there, but we'll see where we go. Before that, let's take a look at the silver and gold markets are again open. And silver's down. So far, the big hype story about never happened before, historic, long position, commitment to traders, all the buzzwords. It's not really changing the tenor of trading yet, if it ever will. We've heard many of these stories about never happened before, historic this, historic that, and the price goes lower. Gold also down 40 cents at $11.95. Cryptocurrencies, they have been up and down, mostly down, a little bit of a stabilization today. Litecoin at about $55, up around 2.5%. Ethereum back below 200 at 196. Bitcoin Cash at 480, up a little bit. And Bitcoin, 62.53, up about 1%. All right, let's take a look now at the situation with silver. Oh, before we do that, I did in case you missed the top gold and silver stories for the last 2 weeks, and the headline was that Malaysia had canceled another Belt and Road project, and I didn't give any details. It was the title of the YouTube and of the blog post that I didn't cover. So briefly, last month I noted that Malaysia had suspended a $20 billion Chinese Belt and Road project, and was basically because they thought it was too expensive. They thought that there was some corruption in the deal. And then this week they announced that they were also actually canceling, not suspending, 2 oil and gas pipelines. So they suspended a Belt and Road rail project that was going to connect the Malaysian peninsula with with China, and this one, they decided to outright cancel 2 pipelines worth about $2 or $3 billion. So the myth of China marching inexorably across Asia and becoming a dominant player is not panning out. And again, it's a function of the bringing the Chinese model to the rest of Asia. And as we've talked about, some of that model is basically a lot of borrowing and building of infrastructure that either may not be economical, may be built on the concept if you build it, they will come, or may just be built on the idea that it creates work and GDP and employment, and Malaysia for now is saying no thank you to that. All right, let's get into the big silver buys and all the hype around JPMorgan. Now JPMorgan, the story goes, and I'm not going to get into specifics. Last time I did that, I heard, oh, it was this amount, it was that amount. The idea is conceptual here. It's not how much exactly JPMorgan has and how many American Silver Eagles they might have or how many Canadian Maple Leafs. I can't keep track of that, and it's largely irrelevant because people come at me with all different kinds of numbers. JPMorgan has 700 million ounces, 800 million ounces. I can't keep track of how the breakdown is supposed to be. As I say, the only thing I can actually put my finger on that JPMorgan has is what you're looking at on the screen. That doesn't mean that they have it, but we're going to entertain the concept that if they're going to have anything, most likely it is what you're looking at on the screen, which is the silver that's in the JPMorgan Chase COMEX approved depository. I will entertain that, and I'll explain how I get there. As to any other silver that JPMorgan might own, Silver Eagles, Canadian Maple Leafs, bars, anything, there I can't get there. There's nothing you can point to. There's no evidence of any of it other than speculation. So this discussion is going to be based around assuming we can get there, that the 145 million ounces that's in the JPMorgan depository belongs to them. And then we're going to say, so what? I cannot entertain that they own any other silver without any piece of evidence. At least with the depository, we could say it's under their control. They may have taken delivery in their name. This might be their silver. Now, any other silver I cannot add to their pile, and I can't add to the concept. This I might be able to get there just for purposes of discussion. Okay, so but before we get to JPMorgan, I want to outline what others have done is the two other times that individuals or entities had accumulated about 130, 145 ounces of silver, and what actually happened when they did it. So let's go back to the mid to late 70s when the Hunts brothers were on a mission to acquire as much physical silver as possible and to take delivery of it and protect themselves against the ravages of inflation. And they bought a lot of their silver through brokers, but they also bought a lot of it on COMEX on margin. They bought on contracts and they stood for delivery. They got the delivery. Now, what's interesting about what happened to the Hunts brothers is part and parcel of their acquisition. The price of silver, in reaction to their activities, rose. And I got a chart here to show you historically spot price of silver. See if you can see that on your chart there. No, you don't have. There you go. Okay, it needs to come down a bit. Oh, there you go. Okay, so if you look at the Hunts brothers, most of the silver they were buying was in the mid 70s to 79, right up to 1980. And if you look at the chart, you can see it rising as they're buying. Rising, 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 1980 all the way up. And then, without getting into all the details of what happened to the Hunts brothers, they were forced to liquidate their position as the price fell due to COMEX changing the rules on them and saying all people can do now on COMEX is sell silver. You can't buy it. And so as people were selling, the price was going down, and that made their margin position screwed up, and then they had to cover the margin. They couldn't do it, and boom, they were bust. But the Hunts brothers, as a result of buying as much silver as they could and buying as many COMEX contracts to stand for delivery, they actually drove the price up. And then, of course, the price came crashing down because COMEX effectively shut down buying and selling silver on the COMEX, and then the largest buyer was gone, and that really screwed up faith and trust, I suppose, in the COMEX. But of course, they changed it all to being the Hunts were the bad guys. They were trying to corner the market. But that's a story for another day. Now, the next thing that happened in terms of a large buy was Warren Buffett announced, or Berkshire Hathaway announced on February 3rd, 1998, that they had acquired 129,710,000 ounces of silver. And on that February 3rd, 1998 announcement, they mentioned that they started buying silver on July 25th, 1997, and they completed their purchase on January 12th, 1998. Now, if you look at the chart here, because the price of silver is single digits, and we're doing it on this chart where the price goes up to the 50s, it doesn't look like much, but I've drawn a circle here where it says Warren Buffett. If you take your look down, let me just make sure you can see it on your screen. Yeah, you can. So go to 1998, and you can see the big spike there, the blue line there. It's a pretty big spike. And that occurred, and you can see the bottom in 1997, mid-97, and then to the beginning of 1998. And the reason for that was Warren Buffett was buying silver through a broker in London. And clearly the price was being driven up as a result of his big purchases. Now the price in July, early August 1997 was $4.40. And by the time he announced, and it rose to like $6.20 in December, and by the time he announced the whole deal, the price had risen to about, I think it was $8.21. Let me just check. $7.81. Now that's an increase of 78% in a period of about 6-7 months. So while Buffett was buying all that silver, the 129 million ounces, he drove the price up 77%. And then it went up even more after he announced it, and then it faded back down. It wasn't as big of a deal as when the Hunts brothers drove the price from about $5-6 all the way up to $50. But there was a big spike even when Buffett was in the market. Now, if you look at JPMorgan, and presumably when they were buying their silver, effectively started around 2011 in that depository, assuming that's their silver. Well, look at the price. It goes down the entire time that they're buying. We say, well, they're smart. They're buying on the way down. But generally, when you buy that amount of silver, or not generally, when we've seen others buy it on the open market, the price goes up. However, that doesn't mean that is not necessarily dispositive. That is not dispositive, because we have seen that the Indians have imported 230, 250 million ounces without moving the needle and actually buying that much silver in 2015, and the price actually went down. So it's not evidence or dispositive evidence that because the price went up when the Hunts brothers bought, and because the price went up when Warren Buffett bought, and then when JPMorgan bought similar amounts, that the price drops, you don't necessarily say, aha, that can't mean that there's something wrong here. The price would have risen if they were buying, therefore they weren't buying. No, I don't make that conclusion, because even if that silver is or isn't JPMorgan's, it's still been added to the COMEX vaults. Now remember, a lot of silver's been added to the COMEX vaults, not just the JPMorgan silver, but other silver, and the price has dropped. Here's the overall amounts. We mentioned last night that amounts were added to the CRT, CNT depository, the Brinks depository. They've also doubled their silver. So the fact that silver is being added to stockpiles and the price is dropping doesn't tell me anything, because the price can drop even when we see large physical demand. We saw 2015 record Silver Eagle sales. We saw 2015 record Indian silver imports. And we saw some silver added to the depositories also, and the price fell down. So I don't use that as an argument that no, JPMorgan couldn't have bought silver, because if they did, the price would have dropped. However, if they had bought 800 million ounces over the last few years, I don't think you could get away with that amount. I think you can get away with what's in the COMEX depository, along with the big silver demand in 2015, the big Indian demand. But remember, if it was 800 million ounces or 700 million ounces, that's a big difference. Now you're talking 6-7 times the amount that's in the depository. And not only is it a large amount, there's nowhere you can even say, yes, they bought that amount, other than speculation. There's no document you can point to other than you wish to believe it, you want to believe it. You can create a scenario why it might be true. I mean, I can create scenarios that Goldman Sachs bought a lot of gold or a lot of silver. If you can't point to any document, then it's very difficult to accept it, and it's not up to me to disprove something that no one has put forth evidence for. But let's get back to the depository, the 145 million ounces. So they're back up on your screen there. And let's entertain the idea that really most of it, they bought it in the last year and a half. Now, this theory about JPMorgan owning lots of silver has been around for years. And it's almost like it's come to fruition in the last year and a half, because if you go back to 2015, that depository only had 50 million ounces. It's pretty much tripled since 2015. So let's say that this silver is in there, and let me give you another piece of evidence where if you wanted to insist, but again, this doesn't prove anything, but it helps the case that it's possible. Okay, what I'm showing you here is from the annual report of JPMorgan. It doesn't say, and JPMorgan has 150 million ounces of silver in its name in a depository. It doesn't say that. All it says is that they do buy and sell precious metals and base metals. That's about it. Well, that at least doesn't tell you that they don't buy precious metals and they don't buy, but knowing that JPMorgan, here's the thing about JPMorgan. JPMorgan has net profits of 25 billion a year, net revenues of about 100 billion a year. So these amounts are not really worth that much. Interestingly enough, the 145 million ounces is only worth about $2 billion. I say only, but the point being is that this is not a big position, even if it's all theirs. Now, I don't know if you can read this. It says the firm primarily purchases and sells precious metals and base metals and may hold other commodities inventories under financing and other arrangements with clients. Now, this silver that's in the depository could be held on behalf of clients. It could be leased out. Who knows what the tenor of that silver that's in the depository is. The only thing we do know, and this gives some credibility that it might be theirs, although again, it's just a piece of data, doesn't necessarily mean. But the point being is that, as I mentioned last night, the difference between eligible stocks and registered stocks is that the registered stocks, and I've been following this chart for years now, has not moved. And the registered stocks are the one that's ready to deliver. Now, the eligible stocks are the stocks that are in the good delivery bar size, the 1,000 ounce bars, the 999 purity. They're ready to go, but they're not registered. The interesting thing is that would give some credibility that this belongs to somebody who's holding it, not looking to sell it, is it hasn't been registered. Now, not that registration is a big event, but the fact that 5.122062 ounces is the only amount that they've registered, and it hasn't been registered in, I think it's like 4 or 5 years that I've been following this. The amounts of silver just keeps getting added to the eligible, but they never seem to register it. All right. So let's play devil's advocate and say they've taken this delivery. It's all theirs. They haven't apothecated. They're not holding any silver in their depository. None. Not for any client. None of it. All of this is theirs. It's a stretch, but you could make the argument because at least you have a document that shows that they've taken delivery of silver, that they have silver registered in this form in a depository. Everything else, you can't say it. The amount of silver that's in SLV, you cannot attribute, and I don't think anyone says you cannot attribute the silver that they're custodian for, that they own that. They don't own that. It'd be foolish to say they own it. I don't think anyone says that, although people might say they might have crack at it because they got control over it, they could apothecate it. But that's not the theory that they have 800 million or 900 million, whatever the number is, ounces of silver. So let's assume by all the stretches that we get over, all the hurdles we get over, that JPMorgan owns every last ounce purely unencumbered in the JPMorgan depository. So that's 145 million ounces. And it could get, let me show you the delivery chart here. The numbers would match because they would have had to take in delivery of that, or they could have put it in there, not necessarily through COMEX deliveries. It could just be in the right form. But according to this chart, I don't know if it's showing up. There you go. It's hard to see. I can't get the, well, don't worry about it. You can see that over this, the one to the right is 2017. The next one is 2016. The 158 number, the amount of deliveries that COMEX had delivered. It doesn't say where they went, but clearly over the last 4 or 5 years, there's enough silver that's been delivered for some of that to end up in the JPMorgan vault of 140 to get them to 145 million ounces. All right. Now, let's get back to our silver price. All right, so let's say we've now determined, which we haven't, but let's say we've determined that there's 145 million ounces of silver JPMorgan's had. And during the time period during which they've accumulated it, the amount of silver that was mined in 2016 was 868 million ounces. So they would be eating up, and they didn't get it all in 1 year, so it's conceivable that there's enough silver, just like there's enough silver to get over to India, 300 million ounces a year, 250 million ounces a year. It's not a stretch that 50 million ounces can get into the COMEX JPMorgan vault in any given year, given the amount of silver that's produced in a given year. And no one's denying that the silver's in the JPMorgan vault, although some may question those numbers. But for purposes of this exercise, no one is disputing that JPMorgan has 145 million ounces in its depository. The only thing that's in dispute or under question is who does it belong to. Although some could say that you can't trust any of these numbers, but of course, when you're trying to make the point that JPMorgan has silver, obviously you're going to assume and argue that the numbers are correct. So let's assume that the 145 million ounces are in there and that it wasn't that much of a stretch to get them in there because they did mine about 900 million ounces in 2016, about 850 million ounces in 2015. Now, back when Buffett bought his silver, his 130 million ounces, it was a little more difficult to come up with that silver because they're only mining about 550 million ounces a year in the late 90s. But in any event, I think we can easily say that the JPMorgan vault holds 145 million ounces. It's not inconceivable that they do. The fact that their silver holdings have doubled over the last year is not out of line with what CRT has in theirs and what Brinks has done. They've both doubled their silver holdings. The COMEX holdings overall are pretty much doubled over the last year. We're seeing big increases in holdings of silver over the last year. Now, here's where I want to differ with the idea that why JPMorgan might be buying silver. So let's assume they've bought 145 million ounces over the last 5 years. And it's cost them probably over $2 billion because that's the price of it, net worth of it now, but they bought it obviously at prices higher than $14. They bought it at 15, 16, 17. They bought it probably in the 20s, in the 30s, in the 40s, going all the way back to 2011. So right now they're sitting on a loss of their silver. So if the price were to go up, and let's assume, which I don't, that the reason they own this silver is to make a nice big fat trade and make a killing on silver. And the understanding is they're just going to now let the price rise. They're $2 billion worth of silver, which they probably paid an average of, I would say, $20 an ounce or $21 an ounce. That was about $3 billion. So right now they're sitting on $1 billion loss at $14. So they've lost $1 billion if they indeed have 145 million ounces. And the losses obviously would be even greater if somehow in some mythical world, they had 700 million, 800 million ounces. But for purposes of this, I'm not going to assume they have that because I can't get there in any rational way. With the silver that's in the depository, I can, although I can't say for sure, but I can argue that that belongs to them and that's theirs. But I can't prove it. But at least there's something you can point to and say, okay, maybe it's theirs. So let's assume that they paid at least $20 an ounce on average for all this silver. That's worth about $3 billion. And right now what they got is worth about $2 billion. So the theory is that if they were to allow this to just happen, they control everything and they're just going to let it happen. Well, if it went to $25 an ounce, they would be worth like $3.7 billion, which would mean they'd make about $800 million if it goes to $25 an ounce. If it goes to $30 an ounce, they make about $4.4 billion. So they might make $1.5 billion if the price of silver goes to 30. But remember, the price goes to 30 and they're selling. Could they even keep the price at 30? Because obviously what we saw in the other chart, if you go back now to the chart, that when the Hunts brothers and Buffett sold, the price goes down. So it's very difficult to exit those large positions. Now, the Hunts brothers didn't have an opportunity to exit anything. They were forced out of their position. And that's why the price, you can see in the chart here, went straight up and then boom, straight down. But even Buffett, he has that big spike there, and then the price drops when he's just holding it. But then in 2006, it's hard to tell here, but the price dropped after they sold it, and it didn't go back up until the beginning of 2007. After they sold, you can see it's a big start of a rise up in 2007. So the idea that the price is somehow going to go up to $30 and JPMorgan is going to be selling or even not selling along the way and waiting to sell. Remember, anytime there's large selling, the price is not necessarily going to stay high for you to sell into. Now, it would seem to me that holding that much silver, 145 million ounces for 5 years, remember, I mentioned JPMorgan makes $24 billion a year in profit, $100 billion in revenue. The idea of the velocity of their money is important. They're not just going to leave. If they can trade that position every day, they're going to make far much more money than just buying silver, sitting and waiting, and hoping to make $1 billion or $2 or $3 billion off their 145 million ounces over the next 5, 6, 7 years, whatever they've been waiting to do this. Here's something people haven't considered. And this fits more in line with what the silver promoters have been saying. What if the silver promoters have been saying about JPMorgan? That they're suppressing the price of silver, correct? That the idea is that JPMorgan is working for the government and JPMorgan is manipulating the price of silver down on behalf of the government. They can get away with it. They use naked shorts, and they're not in this for the profit because they lose money when they throw naked shorts at something. I mean, that's the other thing you got to consider. Whatever money they're going to make back under the scenario where they're going to sell the silver, they've lost money naked shorting it, I'm sure, on many occasions. But let's say if the idea is that JPMorgan is there to help suppress the price of silver, did anyone consider that maybe the reason that these 145 million ounces are there, either under their control or owned outright, is to use to further suppress the price of silver? Now you say, how could the 145 million ounces of silver be used to suppress the price of silver? I'll give you an example which should be very obvious. What happened last week? The price of silver continued to drop. And what also happened, very oddly, the U.S. Mint ran out of silver eagles. Now that tells you why. Well, when the price drops, you have a demand surge. So we saw the price drop from 16, 15, 14. Finally, the silver buyer said, that's enough. I've had it. I've seen the bottom. I'm not catching a falling knife. I'm getting a bargain here. I'm going to buy now. Gold silver ratio is 85 to 1. They're running out of silver at the U.S. Mint. People are buying. There's these stories about JPMorgan, commitment of traders, historic this, never happened before that. You got to buy now. All right. Well, the problem with keeping up the con is if that happens and you run out of silver, you start to scratch your head and you say, whoa, wait. How is the price falling when there's no silver to buy and people are trying to buy silver and there's demand for silver, and you're telling me, are you kidding me, that the price of silver is going down? Well, if we get to a point where they want to continue to drive the price down and there isn't enough physical silver, guess who has it to mete it out to the market if they want to? JPMorgan. Now, maybe JPMorgan, let's play devil's advocate, has more than 145 million. And let's say they do have plenty more silver where that came from, although I can't prove it. But I want to invent stories too. And let's say they did buy. Let's say they bought 350 million American Silver Eagles and Canadian Maple Leafs combined over the last 10 years. And JPMorgan just got them. They've either melted them down or they have whatever. Let's say they've melted them down. They're good to go. So let's say JPMorgan has 350 million ounces of silver in they've melted it down. It's ready to go. And there's not enough silver to meet demand, and they all of a sudden they come on their white knight and they just roll it back into the market. And guess what happens now? The price of silver can go lower. Why? No one's having any trouble buying it at $14. No one's having any trouble buying it at $13. Why? JPMorgan is supplying the market. So if you're going to invent stories about what JPMorgan's going to do, I would argue that their profit mode is limited. They make a fortune doing everything else. They don't need to sit on silver for 10 years in order to make a few $billions. They make $24 billion a year, basically rigging the other markets and doing what they want. They don't need to sit on this large. Now you could say, well, they just came upon it. It's an opportunity. Yeah, but that doesn't go with the idea that somehow they're working to manipulate the silver price. Because if they're working to manipulate the silver price, why do they want to let it go higher? So they can make $2 or $3 billion? That wouldn't make any sense. They can make $2 or $3 billion many other ways. They don't have to wait 6, 7, 8 years to do it. Even if they had more, so they make $10 billion. It would be over a period of time. And could they actually get the price if they were selling that much? Seems more likely they could use the silver that they may have or may not have, but if you want to believe they have all this silver, they could use that to manipulate the price of silver lower. And therefore, not only would they be smacking down the silver price through the paper games, they'd be smacking it down by flooding the market with the silver that they have. And so I'm not convinced that people, they just have one idea in their head. JPMorgan is buying silver, so I am buying silver too. JPMorgan is going to allow the price of silver to rise, and they are going to make a fortune, and I am going to ride with them. Well, maybe not. Maybe not for many reasons. Maybe they don't have any silver, but what if they did, and what if they have it to suppress the price rather than try to pick up a few extra $1 billion that they probably don't need anyway? All right, that's my take tonight. I'm not saying that that's the case. All I'm saying is you hear these stories, they end up in the echo chamber. They're wide. I was having a discussion today with Trace. He was saying, well, this has been widely reported. And I said, yeah, just like weapons of mass destruction were widely reported and therefore widely believed. Everyone right now, it's been widely reported. Every alternative media channel is running with the story that JPMorgan has 800, 900 million ounces of silver, and they're now going to let silver go, and they're going to make a fortune when they sell their silver, and we're going to make a fortune because we're holding silver. There's too many other ways of looking at that story. Hey, if it works out that JPMorgan's got 800 million, even though no one could prove it at the time, and they end up having it, congratulations. That was great speculation. But maybe they have 800 million ounces, 900 million ounces, but they don't have it for the reason that people are saying they have it, to make money. They have it for the reason to suppress. Let's see what you guys think. Just trying to throw as much different ideas out there. Bogus fiat. I dream of JPM. I saw your comment. Yes. Well, you saw my comment, it says. But I saw your comment on Truth Never Told channel, where he was talking about the relative rarity of silver to gold, and therefore silver should be higher. And you pointed out what we've been talking about here, which is that platinum is 10 times rarer than gold, and it's cheaper than gold. And then somebody pointed out, well, platinum doesn't have a monetary history. That's partially true. It actually does. In Russia, they made platinum coins. But right now, if you want to use the monetary argument, silver doesn't have a monetary history the last 40 years. Gold still does. Gold is still held as a monetary asset at central banks. It's not silver. Carl Joseph DiMarco, back in action, back in class, right to the front. Bogus fiat. Lewis, your comment on SGT report. Yeah, the comment I left on SGT report is I said there's still no evidence. No one can show me evidence that JPMorgan has any physical silver. I try to make the argument that the silver in the COMEX might be theirs, but other than that, no one has shown anything other than just mere speculation that they might own Eagles, they might own Maple Leafs, they might own bars, they might own prospective rounds. I don't know what else they might own, but I haven't seen any evidence that they own it. But people assume they own it. They repeat it as if it's fact. 800 million ounces, 900 million ounces, 1 billion ounces, whatever the number is. And then from there, not only do they assume that they have it, they assume that what's going to happen now is JP Morgan's going to let it rise and they're going to make money off of that 1 billion ounces that they have. That's a lot of stretches going on there. Hey, Louis, you make me think twice when thinking about going all in. Thanks for that. Dano454R. If you look at the last 7-8 years, the number of pump stories we have, the most recent one I exposed about over a year ago was gold back yuan, gold's game changer. They were gonna back the oil back yuan futures denominated contract with gold. I heard Rickards, I have all of them say it, that they're gonna just go over to the Shanghai Gold Exchange with the yuan that they got in exchange for the oil, and they'll just get gold. And then they realized, oh, they can't do that because the gold can't leave the country. Then it became, there'll be a gold triangle. They're going to take the yuan and that they get when they deliver their oil, and they're going to go buy gold with it on the London Bullion Exchange. Well, that's stupid too, because oil producers can buy gold now anyway with the dollars that they get or whatever they get. They don't do it. They don't want it. But the other thing was with the yuan, the same people saying that it's going to create gold demand, they're the same ones bragging about China to crush the dollar. Yuan is going to be the world's reserve currency. And in the same sentence, they're saying, well, no one's going to want the yuan in exchange for the oil, so they're going to dump that and go buy gold with it. Never made any sense. But that was gold's game changers, I remember. ASMR people clapping away. Miser. Price is totally paper now, and they're making money shorting it. That's correct. Not just JP Morgan, but others as well. That's totally correct. And that's why we see these big physical purchases. And I think I made the point when I was showing you that, well, the chart's still there, that the fact, it doesn't mean that JP Morgan couldn't have bought 600-700 million ounces of silver during this time period and the price fell. Because we saw, why not? I mean, India bought 300 million ounces in 2015 and the price went from 18 to 12. U.S. Mint sold 50 million Silver Eagles almost. Canadian Mint, 40 million. I mean, they were selling silver left and right and the price was falling down. Although I think if you get to the point, remember what a lot of people say in the community is that at some point, the physical will overwhelm the paper. And I would think that if JP Morgan was buying 800 million, 900 million, 1 billion ounces, plus all the silver demand, I think that might have done it, and we might have seen some uptick in price, but who knows? Who knows? All right. John Periconi. If JPM doesn't own any silver, then think about how high the price will go when they finally do buy. Now I'm going to have to read that twice. If JP Morgan doesn't own any silver, then think about how high the price would go when they finally do buy. Why would they buy if they haven't bought now? That's almost, you're looking at things through a silver lens, that everyone's interested in silver, and if they haven't bought any silver yet, then they're gonna start buying it. I don't know why you would think that. I mean, why wouldn't they buy copper, zinc, aluminum, tin, gold, platinum, palladium? And see, that's the problem. When people are focused on a particular metal, they assume that the whole world revolves around that metal, and they start with conclusions and they try to rationalize their way backwards into why it might happen, not realizing the rest of the world isn't really paying attention to that amount, to what you're paying attention to. And gold to the moon, says Julie Kelleher. Gold pumpers. American Supertramp. So no changes overnight on the status of JPM silver. How about that? So no changes overnight on the status. Well, if you're talking about changes in the COMEX vault, we won't get that till tomorrow. There's been no real changes in anything. I mean, ever since they've been pumping this story, since like Tuesday of last week, the silver price, JPMorgan's going long and this game changer, buy silver now. The price hasn't moved at all. Gold silver ratio unsustainable. What if it's China's silver that JPMorgan is holding? Okay, let's consider that. So there's 145 million ounces in a vault that's designated a JPMorgan vault. Now we just went through, well, what if it belongs to JPMorgan? And we came to the conclusion that one scenario, they could be holding it to make $1 billion if the price goes to $30, or they can make a couple $1 billion, or that silver is there for them to flood the market with to make sure there's enough silver, even at lower prices, if they want to drive the price lower. All right, let's say it's got nothing to do with JPMorgan, or let's say, however they did it, they took delivery in their name, but it was really for China. Well, then it means China's got a stockpile of silver worth a couple $1 billion, and whenever they need it, they have silver. If they bought it cheap for industry, then they'll just ship it home over time, and it won't. Here's the thing. Whatever was going to happen to the price of silver, a result of JPMorgan acquiring that silver and stuffing it in its vault, already happened. Nothing's going to happen now. What I mean is, whatever happens to the price won't be because JPMorgan is adding that silver. They've already added it, and we've seen nothing happen. The price went down. So if that's China's silver, all we can say is, good job, China. You got your silver cheap, and if the price goes up, they can sell it. If the price doesn't go up because they manipulate it, but they still need it for industry, well, then they've basically bought a forward contract, and now they've got silver for their needs. So it won't have anything to do with the price. It would just be either a smart move by China or I wouldn't think China. See, when people think that, I can't see how you would say that someone would buy the silver to make the money. China has trillions and trillions in debt, and there's no way they're ever counting on making $1 billion or $2 on silver. I don't think that's what they would do it for. They would do it because they might need it. Anita A, sounds like I missed it again, just tuned in. You can always go back and listen once it gets it'll get loaded up the second I get off the live cast, and also be on BitChute, BitTube, and Real.video. American Supertramp. It would be good banking to have a stash. Yeah, there's no two ways about that. When Buffett had his silver, the press release said it amounted to 2% of Berkshire Hathaway's net assets. Now, this amount would amount to, you could say, okay, well, let's argue that it's got nothing to do with them wanting to sell it. Let's just say JPMorgan has it the same way a central bank would have it, because they want to include it in their balance sheet as an asset, which they don't. If you remember, I showed you, they listed as part of their trading, if at all, if they're leaving listing that. They count that as part of their trading revenues. So, but you could argue that any entity might want to have. I know that Overstock keeps a certain amount of gold, silver, and Bitcoin in their treasury, but this isn't listed as a treasury asset. But it wouldn't be a bad idea for a bank to have gold or silver. But then I think they would announce it. See, the theory that they have this silver for some type of trading profit is why they're not saying anything. If they wanted to get the benefit of saying, we're a prudent bank, we've got a stash of silver, we've got a stash of gold, I think they come out and say that. And the reason they don't want to say that is JPMorgan's like the government. They want to downplay the fact that there's any value in gold or silver. They don't want to say we're worth something because we have gold or silver. All right. American Supertramp would be good, but yes, to control in a case of market crash where people make silver on it would not be 1 ounce rounds. That's silly. No. JPMorgan would not hold silver rounds or silver eagles or silver. I mean, they'd have to open up a coin shop to sell them. No, they would have to have them in big amounts. But it also doesn't make sense for them to buy them at a premium and then melt them down. There's a lot of work in that, to buy hundreds of millions of coins and then and pay a premium and melt them down. Now you can say, well, they don't pay the premium. Why wouldn't they? That's a governmental. You can get a FOIA request and find out how many Silver Eagles were sold and to whom. And I have filed that, and didn't say anything about JPMorgan getting any of them. Now you're into whole conspiracy. Well, they did it on the side, and I'm not sure that that's possible. But even if it was, it still wouldn't make any sense if they paid the $2 then to melt them down. You automatically lose the premium on each and every coin. Remember, at $10, that's $10 an ounce. That's 20% loss. At $15, it's about a 12.5%, 13% loss. So automatically off the board. You'd have to count that into the loss. So first of all, JPMorgan's already probably lost $1 billion in what they have. If they actually had hundreds of millions in coins, you'd have to count the loss that they'd already taken on the premium that they'd have to make up for the price to go higher. None of that makes much sense to me. All right. ASMR people, I agree. If JPMorgan has the silver, it's using it to make more money on the paper market. Yeah, as a base from which they can now never have to worry about someone standing for delivery, and of course they've got it. There's no busting into the COMEX because no one's going to stand for 80 million ounces. You could see that a mile coming if there were that many contracts out there. And they got 145 in their vault. COMEX has 295 million ounces. No one's going to stand for that kind of delivery. There's position limits, so it's not going to happen. There's enough silver there that the COMEX operators can see that coming a mile away, and it won't happen. Nicholas Smith, gold may be in trouble. Silver around $10 is already low. Soon we can get silver door handles on cars. I can see silver going below $10. I'll tell you, if it goes below $10, I want to find a silverware set. I would love to dine in style, at least just the small one with maybe not with the teapot, but if you can get a silverware set for $50, $60, I would do it. Kurt Gerhardt, what is the future demand for industrial use for silver? Okay, now you can only go by trends. A lot of people think solar is the future for silver, but it isn't, because even if we up the solar panel production 5-10 fold, what they're doing in the industry is a thing called thrifting, where they use less and less silver per panel. They can even use nanoparticles in some of it. They can use graphene. They can use aluminum. So even if it got to a point where they were needing to use a couple 100 million ounces a year, they would never get there. They would figure out a way not to need that much silver, or to start using alternative technologies. And that's always what happens. People, you can't extrapolate, well, in 2010, they used 50 million ounces to make X number of panels. If they 10X that, they're going to need 500 million ounces. No, it will never happen that way. So electronics, same thing. The silver used in electronics since 2010, I think in 2010 it was 310 million ounces. In 2017, according to the Silver Institute, it was 230 million ounces. So the amount of silver used in electronics has dropped 70 million ounces a year. Even though there's more electronics, how can that be? Well, they probably use less silver, and they also, think about what's happening. Most of your computing power is now in devices, small devices, not big, clunky machines. So you can't count on it. Oh, they're finding more uses for silver every day. Yeah, but how much silver do they need? It's the same with copper. When I hear these stories about silver is so useful, without silver this, without silver that, I say the same things about copper. Without copper, you couldn't drink water. Copper piping is used all over the world. Without copper, we wouldn't have pennies. Without copper, we couldn't conduct electricity in our homes because silver is too expensive. Copper is the metal of the future. You could say the same stuff. Buy copper. ASMR people, outside of North America and Europe, I don't think the rest of the world treasures silver. It's an industrial metal. That is clearly true. Even in Mexico, I've spoken to people in Mexico, Romania, and India, and they have all told me that silver is, in a sense, a throwaway metal. This idolization of silver is purely an American thing that happened in the last 10 years. Silver has never been the gold standard. No one is good as gold. Rappers don't wear, their bling isn't silver, it's gold. Gold metal, not silver metal. The idea of silver being this prized metal is really just come along in the last 10 years. People selling silver, trying to make it out to be the... Silver was pocket change. It was never gold. And that's why the gold-silver ratio is where it is. The idea that silver is some kind of mythical metal, yeah, it's a great metal. It's a precious metal, but it's closer to a base metal in price. It's not palladium, it's not platinum, and it's not gold. They trade in the hundreds of dollars. Oh, but you'll see the price is going to go 16 to 1. It's never... The last 100 years, you guys should go back if you haven't seen the videos I've done on the gold-silver ratio. Last 100 years, it's been 16 to 1 for about 2 months in total. It never stays there. Doesn't mean it can't go lower, but all the arguments about the gold-silver ratio, I think, are completely off base. Roger Beth, do you see much upside potential for silver? Well, I could say no if you subscribe to the manipulation theory and you really believe the manipulation theory. I would say JPMorgan has the silver to manipulate further lower. I don't know why all of a sudden JPMorgan's your silver buddy. Just like China's not your gold buddy. Why is JPMorgan your silver buddy? Why is all of a sudden JPMorgan the company that's going to make you rich? Because they want to make $2 or $3 billion? That doesn't make any sense. If JPMorgan is the bad guy, the one who's been manipulating prices for the government and manipulating prices downward, they're going to cut you a break now just so they can make a couple. They make $24 billion a year no matter what. I don't understand. This is like the silver bullet for them. They're going to get rich. They already are rich. And if you believe, the same people who tell you that story will tell you that JPMorgan is a rigger. And JPMorgan works for the government. And JPMorgan is immune. And JPMorgan does all this to keep the price of silver down. Why would they want the price to go up? Just to make a couple of $1 billion? They can make that up anywhere else. So I say if they do indeed have this amount of silver in the depository, and if they have 800 million ounces or 900 million ounces elsewhere, well, then I would say then they have that to manipulate, to flood the market, to make sure the price doesn't go higher, and to cover up the fact that the price is going lower and there's no shortage. See, right now, they could drive the price to 10 and everyone would go buy it, hoping you'd be able to make the physical market overwhelm the paper market. It wouldn't happen. The most you would buy is 50 million silver eagles. Well, they got 150 million ounces of silver in the depository, or they have 900 million ounces elsewhere. So you wouldn't be able to do it. So I would say that all this silver can be used against you. What about medical uses? What about it? Look at the Silver Institute's charts. How much silver is used in these medical devices? Very, very, very little. Doesn't mean it's not important. Doesn't mean it's not essential. It's not like everyone's going to be drinking colloidal silver. Even so, there's very little silver in colloidal silver. Scott Wooden, do you see capital going from the metal markets to crypto or vice versa? I don't know, because I thought initially that the crypto was taking away from the metals. But then crypto stopped attracting capital the last 6 months, and we didn't see any big uptick in metals. I think capital is still going to speculative assets like Tesla. To me, it's astounding that company's still worth anything more than 2 cents, given what the company's been through, that it makes no money, the CEO is erratic, the cars have technical difficulties, they don't even make that many of them, the guy goes on TV and smokes dope. I mean, I don't understand. He breaks, apparently, looks like he broke SEC rules, saying he's going to go private, and he names a price. I mean, the fact that people invest in that stuff and that the Swiss National Bank owns shares in that tells me that the capital is still flowing to speculative assets, speculative stocks, Netflix, Facebook, that kind of stuff, and with the blessing of the central banks. I think that's what's driving, that's where the capital goes. It follows the big money. The big money is the central banks. Miser, LOL. JP's silver bullet, and he need to buy one of those sooner or later. Yeah, so, all right, well, those are my thoughts. I don't expect JPMorgan to be your silver buddy anytime soon. And I don't even see the evidence that they have that much silver. I mean, 150 million ounces is enough to keep us down, meaning they can make sure that the retail demand for silver isn't going to be a problem. But I don't see how they have 800 million ounces. I can speculate that they could or they might. And then I could speculate if they had that much, it wouldn't be to make money. It would be to make manipulation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, thank you very much for joining me tonight. If you enjoyed this, make sure you come back every night, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and then check out Smaulgld at smaulgld.com. Check out Smaulgld on minds.com, Steemit, BitChute, Facebook, Twitter. And don't forget, the most important thing you can buy in your life, the most important asset you can buy is a mug. Mugs are money. Measure your wealth in mugs. And get your Smaulgld mug today. I'm shipping them out for a limited time with the Smaulgld Game Changer Eraser packed in the Smaulgld Classic and Super Classic mugs. Those are the ones on the website. And they look like, I'll show you what they look like. The other items that I sell are sold through the Smaulgld manufacturer. And I cannot physically put the Smaulgld Game Changer Eraser in those mugs. But the mugs that you can buy that I will send out to you with a Game Changer Eraser and a note from me will be these two, and I'll show them to you. Let's get them up on the big board. There they are. Boom. So the one on the top is the Smaulgld Classic mug, and the one on the bottom is the Smaulgld Super Classic mug. The Smaulgld Classic mug is $19.99 with free shipping in the continental US and probably Canada. If I get any Canadian orders, I've done that before. And $23.99 for the Smaulgld Super Classic mug below. And they come with a free Smaulgld Game Changer Eraser. If anyone wants to see the Game Changer Eraser. By the way, before I get rid of this screen, also, if you want to become a Smaulgld patron, it's just patreon.com/Smaulgld. If you want to donate via PayPal, it's paypal.me/Smaulgld. On your screen and also on the website, there is Litecoin and Bitcoin and Ethereum payment if you'd like to make a donation. But let me show you your Game Changer Eraser, because that's the special offer you get now if you order a Classic or Super Classic mug. Classic is on the top, Super Classic on the bottom with the red. But the erasers are cool because they say Game Changer. I'll eventually do Game Changer mugs. There is a Smaulgld espresso mug if you want something smaller. That's available from the manufacturer. And then there's also a Smaulgld to-go mug, which is a... where's mine? There's mine right here. It's got a cap on it. You can bring it in the car. You can slap your coffee in there. Very tasty to drink out of that. And there's your Game Changer Eraser. You can see if you got a kid in school, it's good to have an eraser. If you still use pencil and paper, it's good to have an eraser. But actually, it's also good to show people who don't use pencil and paper that this was the old Alt-Control-Delete button, and actually rub it out. They do have that on many programs. They have an eraser up top, and you go up and you grab it and you electronically erase. This is a real eraser. Limited edition Smaulgld eraser. Shark Air, you can always go back and listen. Sorry we missed you. Any comments you might have had, but we'll see you tomorrow night at and Dock of the Bay also. Just go back. I'm going to sign off now and be able to listen from the beginning. The only thing you won't be able to do is you won't be able to see the comments in real time. That takes about an hour for YouTube to upload those comments. So you might not know what, but I try to read the comments so you can hear them. You don't necessarily have to read them. All right. And Miser says, no way, man. Nobody's friend, JP. I don't believe they have physical like that either, by the way. They're not your buddy. If they have silver, I think it's to manipulate. Whatever silver they have, they're going to use to throw it, keeping the price low. Not to make a couple of $1 billion that they can make anywhere. They're going to be there to use it to screw you. All right. Awesome eraser. Well, they're sold separately, Miser. If you want one in the Smaulgld store, and I can give you that, but you're better off getting a mug because I'll throw one in there free of charge. I think they cost like $3.45. But you know, when you order just an eraser from the Smaulgld store, you got to pay shipping. So it's better to bundle it with other items. But there is the Smaulgld store. You can check out the products. There's t-shirts, hats, mouse pad. I got to get myself one of those. Pads, papers, Post-its. There's even a corkscrew, Smaulgld corkscrew. So check it out. Thank you very much. It helps out the Smaulgld site. Also, if you want to buy precious metals, we have links to SD Bullion, Money Metals Exchange, and Golden Eagle Coin. And they have some cool cryptocurrency coins. They have Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, and they have all the different, representations of coins in sterling silver. They're kind of cool. They're about $20, a little less. Smaulgld gets a small commission, non-investment advice to buy gold or silver. But if you're going to buy, you can buy through the Smaulgld links, and Smaulgld does get a small commission. It does help out. You don't have to make a donation. You just buy your precious metals that you're going to buy anyway through the Smaulgld site. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.